In the endgame, the king is your strongest piece. I promise you that by the end of this video, you will have learnt a new concept which you can use in your own endgames to win them. Let's begin. In this game, with the black pieces, was the former world champion, Bobby Fischer. In this position, he played Rook FB8, attacking the white queen. After the trade of the queens, we have an endgame. Here, his opponent played Rook to C7 check. It's time for your first question. What would you play here? Would you play King to G8, King to E6, or Bishop to C7? If you chose the best move, King E6, which activates the king, you get 1 point. Keep these points in track and write them down in the comments at the end of the video. You might be thinking, wait, why are we just giving the pawn away? The reason is, in case white takes the pawn, then we'll play rook c8, and it's very hard to stop this d pawn from promoting because black controls the c file. Therefore, after king e6, Fischer's opponent played pawn to g4, making it difficult for black to move the pawn to f5, which would give black complete control of the center. Bishop c3 prevents white's rooks from doubling up, and then a trade of rooks was offered, and his opponent gladly accepted. Now, it's time for the second question. Black has just stopped the white pawn in its tracks, right? So, what do you think about this position? Who is better? Pause the video and think. If you said that white is slightly better due to this passed pawn, then you are wrong. But why? Aren't passed pawns good? Well, in general, they are good. But in this position, let's see who has the more active king. It's black, which is why the correct answer is that black has a slight advantage practically. Black's king is just so close, right? Now, black played g5, which prevents white from playing g5 himself, which would destabilize the black king side. After king e2, the black king marched forward. King to c5 prevented the white king from going to the c4 square. Now, white had no option really. The reason was that black's king was so active that white couldn't do anything about this pawn at all. In a few moves, black successfully won the pawn. Here, black actually blocked the path of the rook before taking the pawn, because if there would have been a trade of rooks, in that case, the position would be drawish. King takes a6. Now, Fischer's plan was to control the c file and to bring his king even more forward, to activate his king so much that it puts pressure upon the white king. Let's see how he did that. Okay. First, he went rook c7. Okay. Attacked the pawn. King to a5. The king is going forward. Rook c2. No trade for you. Check. It's okay. He's being patient, and now he blocked. He has this path with king a4, king a3 to get into the white camp. Rook a2, rook c7, controlling the file yet again. Now he logged the rook away on black side of the board, which means the king has a free path into the white position. Rook d7, and in a few moves, black's king is ready to infiltrate the white camp. Now the king has reached the b3 square. A potential threat could be rook a1 followed by checkmate on the d1 square. He's following his plan, and now white had to sacrifice the pawn, the knight for the pawn, because there's no way to stop checkmate, right? Do you see how important it is to have an active king? In this position, maybe white thought that due to these two pawns he could get a draw. However, Black slowly cornered the white king using his own king to c4. And now, white here resigned the game because you just can't stop checkmate. This was our first example. It's time for our second example. Here, white played king e2. But have you noticed something unique about this position? Black has a knight for two of white's pawns, right? King e2 was played to connect the rooks, and after rook a1, the other rook went to the b1 square, and here both rooks are supporting the passed pawns, which are connected too. Now, after rook b8 and b4, the black knight lodged itself on this weak c4 square. And after a5 and rook b7, it's time for our third question. Okay, what would you play in this position? Take your time, think about it. Most players would be stuck here. They would not know what to do. They would play something like knight d4 or h3, g4, but all of these are not good moves, right? We want to find the best moves. If you chose king to d3, give yourself a pat on the back and give yourself one more point. It activates the king and perhaps threatens a c4 push. But how is that possible if the knight is over there? That's why bishop c1 was played to trade black's powerful knight for white's passive knight. After this trade, white is free to play pawn to c4. Now the king reached the c4 square. But wait a minute. Something is wrong with this, right? How can the king be so exposed? Black has so many pieces here. Won't the king be in trouble? The answer is no, absolutely not. The reason is it's very hard for black's pieces to actually get to this king here, right? So always be practical in your king endgames. After rook b5, white played rook to b3, trying to activate the rook along this d file. After knight d7 and rook d3, black played bishop b8. It's time for question 4. What would you play in this position? Take your time, have a think about it. The move is rook to d7, capturing the knight, which is a classic deflection tactic because if the king takes, this rook is gone. So black tried to take this pawn first and then took the rook. However, now the material is almost equal, but white has an extra pawn. Do you remember how in the previous example white had this pawn but black won due to an active king? Well, that's not the case here because now white's king is more active and black's king is the one sleeping at home. After a6, black pushed forward. The king went to this amazing c6 square. After rook a1 supporting this pawn, the bishop joined in. Now black white took control of the d file, ready to checkmate the black king, and in a few moves played rook to d7. In this position black decided to resign. The reason is rook to h7, threatening rook to h8 checkmate. So even if there's a random move like h5, well then rook h7, bishop d8, rook h8. This bishop is gone. Do you see the difference between this king on the c6 square and black's king? This is how you play brilliant endgames. Let's see the third example. This is the third example. In this game, Akiba Rubinstein, a former world number 2 player, was playing with the black pieces. This was played over 100 years ago. Here, he captured white's knight, and after pawn takes, it's time for question number 5. Does poor pawn structure like this isolated pawn and these doubled pawns. Does poor pawn structure actually matter in the endgame? Is it important? Say yes or no. The correct answer is yes. It is absolutely important because although there are less pieces in the endgame, they can still be targeted by, let's say, black's rook or this knight here or even this king. So if you said yes, poor pawn structure matters, give yourself a point. Here, black attacked the bishop, took control of the c file, and then there was a trade. Here, if white does nothing, black can swing his rook over to the h file in order to attack this weak isolated pawn. Here, a trade occurred. Now, it's time for question number 6. What is your evaluation of this position? Pause the video, think about it. There's no hurry. If you said that it's a drawish position, or if you said that white will win, you are wrong and you get 0 points. However, if you said that black is completely winning, give yourself a point. The reason is that these pawns are very weak, especially this pawn over here, right? Now, black had an insane plan which shocked me when I first saw it, and it will shock you too. It was to take the king to this side of the board to attack this lonely pawn. But won't this white king just take all of these pawns, like these ones, while black's king is attacking these ones? You might think that can happen, but if you actually look closely, it will take white a lot of time to actually get there, right? What happened is white's king was stuck to defending this pawn. It was stuck defending this pawn. And black had a very simple strategy. It was to push every single pawn forward by 2 squares. But why? Why is he doing this? Well, he knows that white's king can't go anywhere to threaten these pawns because this pawn is hanging. If white gives up this pawn, then the h pawn will promote easily. So what black did is he played slowly, restricted these pawns, is trying to restrict these pawns here, right? Then a trade was offered. An exchange of pawns took place, and after g3, the game is over. The reason is that black's king is way more active than white's. Here, white resigned. But why? Well, simply because after f takes g3 and this trade, black's king will easily gobble up all of these pawns and will promote to a queen, winning the game. In this video, you learnt about the concept of king activity in the endgame. Now what I want you to do is you must analyze a few of your old endgames and see where you could have done better to follow this rule. Post your scores down in the comments. Thanks for watching the video. Train to win. Bye.